The morning rain pattered softly against the windows of Sweet Dreams Bakery while Caris Monroe carefully placed freshly baked cupcakes into the display case, each crowned with a delicate sugar violet that had become her trademark. She cherished these quiet early hours before the doors opened, when the air was filled with the comforting aromas of vanilla and cinnamon, and she could gather her thoughts in peace. Welcome to GraceTime with Auntie. I share brand new life stories here every single day, and I would truly appreciate it if you subscribed and gave this video a like. Now, let's dive right back into my story. I promise you'll be hooked if you stay until the very end. The phone rang precisely at 7:30, which was odd because customers almost never called that early. "Hello, this is Caris." She balanced the receiver on her shoulder and kept arranging the cupcakes. "Good morning, Miss Monroe. This is Barclay Quinn from Quinn, Owen & Associates Law Firm. I'm contacting you regarding the estate of your godmother, Ms. Aries Holloway." Caris went completely still. Aries had passed away 3 weeks earlier after a long fight with cancer. Caris had been at the funeral, but afterward she had buried herself in work so she wouldn't have to face the reality that she would never again see the woman who had stepped in as her mother. "Oh, yes, of course. What can I do for you?" "Ms. Holloway left you an inheritance. We need to schedule a meeting to handle the paperwork. It's rather urgent because of the nature of the assets." "Assets?" Caris cut in. "I don't understand. Aries never mentioned any inheritance." "Your godmother left you her restaurant, Ms. Monroe, the Legacy Crown. Car renewal." Her hand shook so badly that one of the cupcakes slipped from her fingers and splattered on the floor. The Legacy Crown was the most celebrated restaurant in all of Atlanta, where politicians, celebrities, and tycoons came to dine. Aries had spent 30 years turning a modest little cafe into an absolute legend. "There has to be some mistake," Caris whispered. "No mistake at all, Ms. Monroe. Miss Holloway was perfectly clear in her will. You were the daughter she never had. She believed you were the only one capable of carrying on the restaurant's legacy." An hour later, Caris sat in Mr. Quinn's office staring at documents that proved she now owned a restaurant worth millions of dollars. Aries had known about her illness for over a year, the lawyer explained. She planned every detail meticulously, along with the restaurant. There is a wine cellar, vendor contracts, and specific provisions for every employee. Plus, she left you a personal letter with her final instructions. Caris accepted the envelope with shaking fingers. On the front, in Aries's familiar slanted handwriting, were the words, "To my dearest Caris. May I take this home to read?" "Of course, but we must finalize the ownership transfer within the next few days. A restaurant cannot stay without leadership for long." Caris nodded numbly, still struggling to process everything. She suddenly remembered being 9 years old and stepping into the Legacy Crown's kitchen for the first time. Her own mother had been the pastry chef there until pneumonia took her when Caris was 14. After that, Aries had raised her, paid for her schooling, and taught her every secret of baking. "You're special, Caris," Aries used to say. "You have hands that understand dough and a heart that pours love into every bite." Lost in those memories, Caris hardly noticed signing page after page. She had learned everything she knew about the restaurant business from Aries, yet actually running the Legacy Crown still felt impossibly daunting. By noon she was back home and hoped to read the letter in private before her husband Jarvis returned from work, but his car was already parked in the driveway of their modest suburban house. They had met 6 years earlier at a charity gala his company hosted. Karis had been in charge of desserts that night. Jarvis had walked straight up to her holding a slice of her lavender honey cake and declared it the best thing he had ever tasted. Exactly 1 year later, they were married. "Karis, are you here?" Jarvis's voice sounded strained the moment she stepped inside. She found him in the living room, nursing a whiskey at 2 in the afternoon, which was completely unlike him. "What's wrong? Why aren't you at work?" Jarvis looked up. He was still strikingly handsome, tall, dark-haired, with strong regular features, but the confident expression he usually wore had been replaced by something close to panic. "My mother phoned me. She heard you inherited the legacy crown. Is it true?" Karis froze. She hadn't breathed a word to anyone yet. How could he possibly know? "So it is true." Jarvis downed the rest of his drink. "I mean, Karis, why on earth didn't you tell me?" "I literally just left the lawyer's office. I was going to tell you tonight. Mom is friends with one of the waiter's wives. The whole staff is in shock. Aries left the restaurant to you instead of the head chef or any of the senior managers." Karis felt heat rise to her cheeks. Naturally, people would be surprised that the owner of a tiny neighborhood bakery had just inherited one of the city's finest restaurants. "Aries was my godmother. We were incredibly close." But in actual restaurant, Jarvis stood and began pacing. "Do you have any idea what this means? This isn't a cute little bakery with 3 tables and homemade cupcakes. This is a multi-million-dollar operation." Karis clutched the unopened envelope. She knew he was right. She had never managed anything on this scale, yet Aries had believed in her. "I can do it. Aries taught me everything she knew." "Karis, be realistic." Jarvis stopped right in front of her. "You create gorgeous cakes, but what do you know about wine lists, staffing, profit and loss sheets?" "I can learn," she answered softly. Jarvis dragged a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture of irritation. "Mom says it's insane, and for once I agree with her." The mention of Tamsin Niles instantly tied Karis's stomach in knots. Her mother-in-law had never bothered to hide her disdain for her son's choice of wife, and always said the word baker like it was something shameful. "What does any of this have to do with your mother?" Karis asked, trying to keep the anger out of her voice. Jarvis looked away. "She's coming over for dinner tonight. She wants to discuss the situation." "Discuss my inheritance?" "Our inheritance," he corrected sharply. "We're married, remember?" Those words stung deeply. In 6 years of marriage, Jarvis had never shown the slightest interest in her bakery beyond calling it a sweet little hobby that brought in pocket money. Yet the moment real money appeared, everything suddenly became ours. That evening, the house filled with the cloying scent of Tamsin's expensive perfume. She swept in without knocking, as always announcing, "I'm here." Darlings, tall, impeccably blonde, makeup flawless, looking at least a decade younger than her 60 years. "Karis, darling." Tamsin air-kissed her cheek. "What astonishing news you must be reeling." "Hello, Tamsin." Karis forced a smile. "Yes, it was completely unexpected." "I'm sure it was. Aries was always so eccentric." Tamsin tossed her coat at Jarvis and sailed into the living room. "Remember how I told you she once refused a state representative because he was 15 minutes late? The woman had quite the temper." Karis stayed silent. Tamsin had never actually known Aries. She simply repeated gossip from her social circle she so desperately wanted to join. Over the dinner Karis had prepared earlier, Tamsin wasted no time outlining her plan. "I've already spoken to Fielding," she told Jarvis while completely ignoring Karis. "He says we must act fast. The luxury restaurant market is booming. We have two options: either sell the Legacy Crown immediately while its reputation is still sky high, or," she paused for effect, "I could step in and run it myself." Karis almost choked on her wine. "Excuse me?" "Don't give me that look, darling." Tamsin laughed lightly. "I wasn't always just a housewife. I was an accountant for a big firm before I married, and I've always dreamed of owning my own restaurant." "You never once mentioned it," Karis pointed out. "There was never a reason to," Tamsin shrugged. "But now the opportunity has fallen into our laps. Jarvis, honey, tell her." Jarvis shifted uncomfortably. "Mom does have a point, Karis. She has financial experience, and I could handle the tech side, website, booking systems, all of that. And what about me?" Karis asked quietly. "Aries left the restaurant to me." Tamsin reached over and patted her hand condescendingly. "Sweetheart, nobody is saying you can't still be involved. You can handle all the desserts. They're divine. But actual management requires experience and connections." Karis felt the envelope with Aris's letter burning in her purse. She should have read it already. "I need time to think," she said. "This is an enormous decision." "Of course, darling," Tamsin smiled with cold eyes, "but don't take too long. Business waits for no one." After Tamsin finally left, Karis locked herself in the bathroom, the only place she could be alone, and opened the letter. "My dearest Karis, if you're reading this, I've gone to my rest. Please don't grieve too much. I lived a full, beautiful life, and I'm so proud of everything I built, especially proud of you. I'm leaving you, the Legacy Crown, not because I lack other heirs, but because you are the only person I trust completely with my life's work. You have the taste, the intuition, the work ethic, and above all the heart. You don't just feed people, you give them joy. That is a rare gift. I know you'll doubt yourself, but remember I also began with nothing but a tiny cafe and passion. The staff will help you. Chef Bram Cassidy has been my right hand for 15 years. Manager Nita Price knows every detail of the operation. They are waiting for you and will support you fully. One more thing. Not all documents and assets were transferred today. There are protections only Barkley knows about. Contact him if anyone gives you trouble. Believe in yourself the way I believe in you. All my love, Aries." Tears streamed down Karis's face as she pressed the letter to her heart. Aries had believed in her, and she would not let her down. When she emerged, Jarvis was waiting in the bedroom holding some papers. "Here," he thrust them toward her. "It's a power of attorney. Mom thinks it will be simpler if you temporarily give her authority to manage the restaurant." Karis stared at the documents, then at the man she had married, remembering how he once praised her talent to the skies. When had he changed? Or had she simply refused to see that he had always been weak and controlled by his mother? "No," Karis said softly but firmly, "I won't sign this." Jarvis's face twisted with fury. "Karis, don't be stubborn. You know you can't run that place. Mom only wants to help. Your mother wants to steal what is mine." Something hardened inside Karis. Aries trusted me. She knew exactly what she was doing. Jarvis flung the papers onto the bed. Aries was a selfish old woman who used you your whole life, first as free labor, then as an emotional crutch, and now she's saddled you with a business you're guaranteed to run into the ground. Don't you dare speak about her like that. Caris raised her voice for the first time ever against him. You know nothing about our relationship. I know my wife has spent 6 years barely scraping by selling cupcakes from a hole-in-the-wall shop. Jarvis stepped closer, and suddenly she owns a multi-million-dollar restaurant. What do you think people will say when they learn the famous legacy crown is now owned by a woman who has never managed anything larger than a birthday sheet cake? Each word cut deep, and Caris felt her confidence waver. Maybe he was right. Maybe she really couldn't do it. I need time, she whispered, backing toward the door. There is no time. Jarvis snatched the papers and followed her. Mom has already spoken to vendors. They're waiting for a decision. Either we help or... The threat hung unfinished in the air. Caris felt trapped. She had spent her whole life yielding, compromising, trying to keep the peace. Fine, she finally whispered. I'll sign, but only temporarily. 1 month maximum. And I want to be informed of every single decision. Relief flooded Jarvis's face. Of course, darling, that's perfectly reasonable. He placed the papers on the table and handed her a pen. Caris took it with trembling fingers, Aries' smiling face flashing before her eyes along with the words, "Believe in yourself." Just then the phone rang. She jumped and the pen fell. I'll get it, Jarvis snapped, clearly annoyed. While he was gone, Caris glanced at the document. It was a full, unlimited power of attorney drafted by Tamsin's personal lawyer. Not temporary at all. It would hand the restaurant over completely with no time limit. Jarvis returned furious. That was Mom. She just spoke to the head chef. He's threatening to quit if a decision isn't made by tomorrow. We have to sign now, Caris. She knew instantly it was a lie. Bram was fiercely loyal to Aries and would never speak to Tamsin. Something snapped inside her. After 6 years of swallowing Jarvis's disdain and Tamsin's condescension and their joint belief that she was nothing more than a quaint little housewife with a hobby. No, Caris said, and this time her voice carried absolute certainty. What do you mean, no? Jarvis roared, stepping toward her. I am not signing. The legacy crown belongs to me. Aries wanted me to have it, and I will not fail her. You'll destroy everything she built in 30 years. Jarvis slammed his fist on the table. Maybe, Caris met his eyes without fear, but it will be my failure, not yours. Jarvis went purple with rage. He grabbed his phone. Fine, I'm calling Mom. She'll sort this out. Caris watched him dial, feeling strangely calm. She had just crossed a line from which her marriage could never return, yet somehow that no longer frightened her. Tamsin arrived 20 minutes later like an avenging storm. She burst through the door without greeting. Caris, Jarvis told me everything. I understand you're upset and grieving, but this is not the moment for emotional outbursts. Caris regarded her mother-in-law silently. 6 years of trying to win this woman's approval. 6 years of pretending not to notice the constant manipulation. I have made my decision, Tamsin. I am going to run the restaurant myself. Tamsin barked a sharp laugh. Darling, be serious. You're a baker, not a businesswoman. The Legacy Crown is a sophisticated operation with dozens of employees and high-profile clientele. One mistake and it all collapses. Is that what you want? No. Karis shook her head. That is exactly why I will never hand it to you. Tamsin went white, then flushed crimson. She whirled to her son. Explain to your wife she is making a terrible mistake. Jarvis looked lost. Karis, please, let's be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Aries entrusted it to me. I have a loyal team ready to guide me. I can do this. A team? Tamsin sneered. You mean those overpaid cooks and snobbish waiters? They'll eat you alive the moment they realize you have no idea what you're doing. I'll take that risk. Karis turned to leave. Stop right there. Jarvis grabbed her arm hard. We are deciding this now. Karis wrenched free. There is nothing left to decide. The restaurant is mine, and I will run it. Jarvis's face contorted. He lunged for the folder of original documents Karis had brought home from the lawyer. Enough, he snarled, ripping them from her reach. Since you refuse to be sensible, I'll make the choice for you. Here, Mom. He thrust the papers at Tamsin. The restaurant is yours now. Do whatever you want with it. Tamsin smiled in triumph. Good boy. I knew you'd come through. Karis watched in stunned horror as her husband handed her inheritance to his mother without even asking her consent. You cannot do this. Those documents are in my name only. Marital property, sweetheart. Tamsin patted her cheek condescendingly. Jarvis has equal rights, and he has chosen to place it in my hands. Perfectly legal. Karis knew that was completely false. Inheritance is separate property in Georgia, unless the will states otherwise, but the originals were now in Tamsin's manicured claws. She looked at Jarvis, searching for the man she married, and saw only a cold stranger wearing a smug grin. You will regret this, she said quietly. I seriously doubt that, he shrugged. You'll be thanking us in a month when the restaurant is thriving under Mom's management. Karis silently gathered her purse and jacket. Where are you going? Jarvis suddenly sounded nervous. To my bakery. I have early orders tomorrow. She walked out into the cool Atlanta night air that smelled of coming rain, feeling an unexpected wave of peace wash over her. She had expected crushing grief or burning rage at her husband's betrayal, but instead felt only clear, resolute purpose. She had no wish to return to that house where Jarvis and Tamsin were likely toasting their victory. Instead, she drove straight to Sweet Dreams Bakery, the one place she always felt completely herself. The familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon wrapped around her like an old friend the moment she unlocked the door. She flipped on the lights and looked around her tiny kingdom, 4 little tables, a glowing dessert case, the compact kitchen. It had none of the Legacy Crown's grandeur, but it possessed something far more precious. It felt like home. Karis pulled out her phone and dialed a number she rarely used but had never deleted. Mr. Quinn, please. It's Karis Monroe. I'm terribly sorry to call so late. Not at all, Ms. Monroe. Is everything all right? She took a deep breath. My husband took the original property deeds and gave them to his mother. They seem to think it's marital property, and they can do whatever they want. There was a short silence, then Barclay's voice sharpened like steel. You're telling me your husband removed the deeds from your possession against your will? Yes, he claimed they were community property. Barclay actually chuckled. They most certainly are not. Inheritances remain separate property in Georgia, unless explicitly stated otherwise in the will. Rest assured, we have certified copies of everything, and the title is already registered in your name alone. Whatever papers they're waving around are meaningless without your notarized signature. Relief flooded through Karis. So I'm still the legal owner? Absolutely, but to avoid complications, I suggest we meet first thing tomorrow morning to discuss protective measures. Karis agreed and added, Ares's letter mentioned that not everything was transferred today, that there are details only you know about. Another pause. Yes, Miss Holloway anticipated possible challenges. Let's go over everything tomorrow at 8 sharp before the city wakes up. That night Karis slept on the narrow couch in the bakery's back room with her phone turned off. She had no desire to hear Jarvis's inevitable panicked calls when he realized she wasn't coming home. At 8 o'clock sharp, she walked into Barclay Quinn's office carrying a paper bag of warm croissants she had baked at dawn. The ritual always calmed her before big moments. Ah, Ms. Monroe, the tall, elegant lawyer stood to greet her. Please have a seat. He accepted a croissant with genuine delight. Extraordinary. Now I understand why Ares spoke so highly of you. Mr. Quinn, what exactly did Ares put in place to protect me? Barclay wiped his fingers and opened a thick file. Ares restructured the business over the past year, knowing her time was limited. The restaurant building itself is in your name, but the wine cellar worth over $200,000 is held in a separate trust of which you are the sole beneficiary. The professional kitchen equipment is owned by another company you control. Most vendor contracts are actually with Ares Holloway and Associates, where you are the only authorized signatory. Karis listened in growing awe. Why make it so complicated? Ares was brilliant. The structure saved taxes, but more importantly, it now shields the restaurant's most vital assets from anyone who might try to seize control, meaning my husband and mother-in-law. Karis finished. I never comment on family dynamics, Barclay said diplomatically, but yes, Ares wanted you fully protected. He slid across a sheet listing every key employee with contact details. Bram and Nita are highlighted because Ares trusted them completely. Karis felt tears prick her eyes again. Ares had thought of everything even after death. What should I do next? Technically, you can walk in and take possession anytime, Barclay replied, but it may be wiser to watch what they attempt first. Any unauthorized action would constitute fraud. Karis decided to wait, but asked to meet Bram and Nita privately as soon as possible. The rest of the day passed in the comforting rhythm of her bakery, baking, greeting regulars, taking orders, among them Franklin, the kind-eyed mailman who adored her blueberry muffins. When he stopped by near closing, she asked casually whether the legacy crown was still on his route. Of course it is, darling, and I was so sorry to hear about Miss Ares. She was a true lady. Anything I can do for you, just say the word. Actually, Franklin, I need a short message delivered to Chef Bram Cassidy. Consider it done, especially if it comes with one of these muffins. An hour later, a text arrived via Franklin Jackson Bridge. 7 p.m. sharp. At 7 on the dot, Karis stood on the quiet bridge watching the slow brown waters of the Chattahoochee. A deep voice behind her said Monroe. She turned to see a burly man in his mid-40s with graying hair and bright blue eyes, scarred chef's hands betraying decades in hot kitchens. Mr. Cassidy, thank you for coming. Call me Bram. Let's walk. I don't want us seen together. As they strolled along the riverfront, Bram filled her in on the last 24 hours. Your mother-in-law showed up this morning with your husband waving papers declaring herself the new owner. She fired sous chef Lam on the spot for being too expensive. He's been with us 10 years and knows every dish by heart. Then she announced sweeping cuts to the wine list and menu, claiming many items were pretentious and overpriced. Karis felt her stomach knot. And the staff? Wary. Most of us have been with Aries for years. We don't do well with sudden dictators. Nada tried to explain that reservations are booked months in advance, and our reputation rests on consistency, but your mother-in-law said fresh vision matters more than old habits. Bram stopped and looked at her earnestly. Aries warned Nida and me there might be a fight for control after she passed. She told us to trust only you. She said you have the rare gift of knowing what people truly need, not just food, but memories. Karis blushed. I'm not sure I deserve that. Aries never wasted praise. If she believed you're the one, then you are. So what now? Tamsin will keep dismantling everything. How long can the staff hold out? Some have already walked, others are watching. Nida and I will stay as long as there's hope, but the legacy crown isn't just a job for most of us. It's the family Aries built. They exchanged numbers and Bram promised daily updates. The following day, Karis met Nita Price in a quiet cafe far from downtown. The elegant 50-something manager looked exhausted. Tamsin has fired anyone who dares question her, slashed the wine list, swapped our seafood supplier for some cheap outfit owned by a friend of hers. Quality is already slipping, yet prices remain the same. Regulars are noticing. Judge Fitzgerald walked out mid-meal yesterday, saying it simply wasn't the crown he loved. Then Nita allowed herself a small smile. Interestingly, when Tamsin ordered half the wine collection sold to raise cash, Edward the sommelier discovered he no longer has access to the cellar keys or codes. Apparently, the cellar isn't legally part of the restaurant premises, and only the registered owner can authorize entry. That would be you, along with signing authority on almost every vendor contract. Aries planned for every contingency. 6 days after the hostile takeover, Jarvis suddenly appeared at the bakery just as Karis was locking up. He looked haggard with dark circles under his eyes. I finally found you. I wasn't hiding. I've been right here. You turned your phone off. You never came home. I'm sleeping on the couch in the back. It's surprisingly cozy. Jarvis seemed thrown by her calm demeanor. Look, I know you're furious, but things have gotten messy at the restaurant. Mom made some changes, and not everyone likes them, especially that chef. Bram keeps sabotaging orders, and Nita claims certain contracts need your signature. Not supposedly they do need my signature, Karis corrected gently. Jarvis ran a frustrated hand through his hair. I know what we did was wrong, but we thought we were helping. Please just talk to the staff, tell them Mom is acting for you. But she isn't. I never authorized her. She took those papers by force, and that gives her zero legal rights. Days later, the situation at the Legacy Crown spiraled. Tamsin radically altered the menu, replacing gourmet dishes with cheaper alternatives, fired 3 more key staff, including the sommelier, who refused to sell the wine collection. Regulars fled. Local press began asking questions, yet Karis stayed quiet at her bakery, watching everything unfold. Why aren't you stopping her? Bram demanded during another clandestine meeting. She's destroying Aries' life work. Sometimes Karis replied, You have to give someone enough rope to hang themselves. On the 10th day, Tamsin made her fatal error. She refused a table to a state representative who had dined there for 20 years because a shady businessman friend wanted it. The politician posted a furious rant online, and the scandal exploded overnight. Social media erupted with questions about what had happened to the legendary restaurant after Aries Holloway's death. That same evening, Bram resigned on principle, refusing to serve frozen food at fine dining prices. 4 senior cooks walked out with him, without a head chef or experienced kitchen, and with a reputation in freefall, the legacy crown teetered on the edge of collapse. The following day, Tamsin paced the dining room in a clashing bright pink suit, desperately searching for a replacement chef. "I don't understand the problem," she announced to the remaining staff. "One cook leaves, we hire another. Atlanta is full of cooks." Nita cleared her throat. "Bram is a Michelin-starred chef of 15 years. Many guests came just for his creations." Tamsin waved her off. "People come for the name, and atmosphere stars mean nothing. Tonight Robert will step up. We'll simplify the menu. No more unpronounceable French nonsense. People want to know what they're eating." Robert, the young junior chef, went pale. "Ms. Niles, I'm not ready to run this kitchen. Maybe we should close temporarily and find a proper replacement." "Close," Tamsin snapped. "Absolutely not. The crown will not lose a single day. You'll be fine. Just cook the usual dishes, only simpler." That night was catastrophic. Without Liam and the senior team, the kitchen fell behind. Dishes arrived late and undercooked. Longtime regular Senator Harrison sent his steak back twice and quietly asked Nita what on earth was happening. "New leadership, new vision," she answered diplomatically. The senator sighed and left half his meal, asking her to pass his condolences to the chef. By evening's end, half the table sat empty as guests walked out or canceled last minute. Tamsin raged at Nita, demanding to know why reservations were collapsing. "Our clientele expect excellence. They notice every drop in quality. Then give me new, less snobby customers," Tamsin declared. "Tomorrow we drop prices 20% and advertise to real people." That same night, Jarvis showed up at the tiny apartment above the bakery, looking utterly defeated. "The restaurant is falling apart. Bram and half the kitchen gone. Guests furious. Mom keeps insisting it's just growing pains, but I'm starting to see it's not." "What did you expect, Jarvis? The legacy crown isn't just 4 walls. It's decades of tradition and the people who made it magical." Jarvis hung his head. "Mom was so convinced she could do better. She's always dreamed of owning a restaurant. By stealing someone else's inheritance," Karis finished quietly. Jarvis flinched. "I'm sorry. I should never have taken those papers. It was wrong." "What do you want from me, Jarvis?" "Help us. Talk to Bram, convince him to return, or at least help find a new chef, people in the industry." Karis shook her head. "Bram will never work under your mother. He respected Aries's vision. Tamsin is turning the crown into something it was never meant to be. She's trying to make it more profitable at the cost of everything. That made it special. It will never work. The legacy crown was always for celebrations for those who value excellence and are willing to pay for it." Jarvis buried his face in his hands. "I tried to tell Mom, but she won't listen. She never listens, and I've never been able to stand up to her." The admission hung heavy between them. The next morning, Karis met Barkley again. "Word is the restaurant is in chaos," the lawyer said with barely concealed satisfaction. Bram gone. Customers fleeing Jarvis came begging for help yesterday. And what did you tell him? That nothing can go back to the way it was. But I need advice on next steps because I don't just want the old restaurant back. I want to build something new that honors Aries while adding my own touch. I've already spoken to Bram, Nita, and key staff. They're ready to follow me. I've even found a perfect smaller space in the old 4th Ward with stone walls and arched windows. The funding. That's where Aries's separate assets come in. Barkley smiled. There's the wine cellar, the equipment leasing company, and a business development investment account with roughly $300,000. Plus, you legally control the brand name, recipes, and concept. Everything of real value can move with you, leaving only an empty shell behind. A plan crystallized in Karis's mind. Meanwhile, Tamsin's desperate discount campaign attracted the wrong crowd who complained the food was still overpriced for what it was. Loyal patrons vanished when they heard Bram was gone. A scathing review from a major food magazine titled Crown in Freefall became the final death blow, quoting Tamsin's own words about democratic, less pretentious cuisine and contrasting them with Aries's lifelong philosophy of excellence. The hashtag Save the Crown began trending. Reservations plummeted to almost nothing. On the 9th day after Bram's walkout, suited men entered the restaurant and calmly began removing every piece of professional kitchen equipment, refrigerators, and the entire wine cellar, informing a hysterical Tamsin that those assets belonged exclusively to Karis Monroe. That evening, Jarvis found his mother slumped in the empty dining room with a bottle of whiskey. "It's finished," she whispered hoarsely. "Without equipment, we can't open. Without the wine, we lose half our revenue. We've been outplayed. Your wife was far cleverer than we ever imagined." The very next morning, a closed for renovation sign appeared on the Legacy Crown's door, but everyone in Atlanta knew the legendary restaurant. As they had loved it was gone forever. Meanwhile, in a historic brick building with arched windows, hammers and paintbrushes flew as Aries's legacy took shape, bringing together the best staff, recipes, and traditions with exciting new ideas from Karis herself. That night Jarvis called. Karis heard raw panic in his voice. "Everything has collapsed. Mom is threatening bankruptcy. She mortgaged her house for renovations. You have to help." "What exactly do you expect me to do?" "Jarvis, return the equipment, the wine, convince Bram to come back." "Yes, Mom finally admits she was wrong." Karis cut him off calmly. "The equipment and wine are already installed in the new restaurant." "What new restaurant?" "I'm opening Aries's Legacy with Bram, Nita, and almost the entire original team." Silence, then a broken laugh. "So while we were desperately trying to save the crown, you were secretly building your own empire, stealing our staff, our assets." "I stole nothing that belonged to me legally, and the staff left because they refused to watch your mother destroy Aries's dream. You planned this from the start." "No, at first I was heartbroken, then furious. Then I understood Aries's true legacy isn't a building. It's the people, the standards, the love she poured into every plate, and your mother nearly obliterated all of it in 10 days. Jarvis pleaded to meet in person. 20 minutes later, he stepped into the half-finished restaurant and stopped dead, staring at the familiar tables, snowy linens, and the gleaming wine cellar filled with Aries's priceless collection. "So this is what you've been doing?" "Yes," Karis answered simply. "Would you like coffee? The kitchen is operational." Over coffee in the little office, Jarvis whispered, Why didn't you tell me? Would you have listened after you stole the deeds and handed them to your mother?" Jarvis looked ashamed. "I did a terrible thing. Mom was so convincing. She kept saying you'd fail and the restaurant would be ruined, and it was her lifelong dream, and you believed her over your own wife. You know, the worst part is realizing our marriage has been exactly like this crisis. You never once stood up to her, not even for me." Jarvis's eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Karis. I always have. I know, but love without courage isn't enough. What about us? Do we have any future?" "I don't know right now. My entire focus is launching this restaurant. Our relationship needs time and space." "Do you want a divorce?" "I want clarity, Jarvis. Your mother controlled you, and therefore our marriage for 6 years. I will not go back to that. If there is an us again, it has to be equal and built on mutual respect." Jarvis left looking shattered yet strangely lighter. The next weeks flew by in a whirlwind of final preparations, and on opening night, under a perfect Atlanta sunset, Aries' Legacy welcomed its first guests. Long-time friends of Aries, loyal Crown patrons, critics, and press filled the intimate stone-walled room. Karis greeted each one personally, feeling both terrified and strangely serene. The menu paid homage to classic Crown dishes while introducing bold new creations. Every course accompanied by a card telling its story or an Aries anecdote. When everyone was seated, Karis gave a short speech thanking them for sharing this milestone, explaining that Aries' legacy honored the past while bravely looking forward, just as Aries always taught. The room erupted in warm applause. The food was sublime. Critics scribbled furiously. Photographer captured every plate, and by the end of the evening, it was clear the opening was an unqualified triumph. As the last guest departed past midnight, Bram allowed himself a rare grin. "We did it." Nida hugged Karis. "Aries would be so proud." "This is only the beginning," Karis answered with shining eyes. Days later, Tamsin appeared at the restaurant between services, dressed in an uncharacteristically modest gray suit, looking fragile. "I came about your offer to lease the old Crown building. At first, pride wouldn't let me accept help from you after how I treated you, but staring at empty walls and mounting debts left me no choice. Plus, Jarvis finally made me see I was trying to hijack someone else's dream instead of building my own. I accept. I'd like to open a completely new bistro there, something affordable and welcoming for everyday people." "I think that's a wonderful idea," Karis said. "Sincerely." And Tamsin added with visible difficulty, "I owe you an apology for years of condescension and for trying to steal your inheritance. I was jealous and power-hungry, and I'm deeply sorry." Karis was speechless but answered, "I appreciate that, and I'm ready to leave the past behind. Thank you." That night, as the restaurant hummed with happy diners, Karis stood at the bar watching her team move like a perfectly tuned orchestra. "This is your legacy, Aries," she thought. "The people you loved and taught. I promise to carry it forward." The sommelier approached with a rare bottle. "Table 5 asked me to bring this to you. It was Miss Aries' favorite for special celebrations." Karis looked over and saw Jarvis sitting quietly in the corner. Their eyes met across the room. He gave a small, hopeful smile but stayed seated, respecting her space. After a moment, Karis told the sommelier to open the bottle and pour 2 glasses. She would join her husband shortly. She still didn't know if their marriage could be saved or if she could ever fully forgive, but in that moment, surrounded by the success she had built and the people who believed in her, Caris felt an unshakable certainty. Whatever the future held, she would meet it with the same heart, strength, and vision Aries had passed down to her. She walked toward Jarvis's table, feeling taller with every step, ready for whatever came next. I'm so glad you stayed with me until the end of this story. If it touched you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe so we can keep growing this little family. Tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I love knowing you're all out there. And if you want to support the channel a little extra, there's a donation link below. I post brand new real-life stories every single day, and here are 2 of my most watched ones popping up on screen right now. Choose your next one and keep the good vibes going.